Hey guys, what's going on? This is Brad from the Ed Army, and today, as you can see, we are talking about Ukkomon as BT16 Ukkomon is almost here, and I have some deck strategies that you may want to see that will be fixed or boosted by the power of Ukkomon. Before I get into it, as always, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We are on the search to 250 subs, and we'd love for you to be a part of the race, and if we get there, we will do it together. Now, as we're pushing, what are we talking about today? So we are talking about Ukkomon, and specifically BT16 Ukkomon. I made a video a while ago now, I think in February, about BT16 Ukkomon, about how it's going to change up the metagame, and it's actually going to be really good. But we do know now, with enough results from the JP format, we have been seeing it be played for a while. We do know that this deck, or this specific card, is in so many decks that actually can utilize it well, and it does have its balancing factors for the metagame. Now, as we jump into it, for those who don't know, obviously it's a little weird if they don't, but for those who don't, there obviously is already an Ukkomon in the game. So we actually have the promo Ukkomon, which has been running around for a while, which is the one that when you get to the breeding area and you push it up, you gain a memory and you hatch again, so giving you a free egg to continue your plays and start up. In conjunction, we're going to look at the BT16 Ukkomon, which is a little bit different, which digivolves for one on top of any, basically any egg, but it specifically is very unique for its effect, because it does actually do something when it comes to the battle area instead of just, hatching and gaining a memory. So let me read off. Well, your turn, once per turn, when one of your Digimon moves from the breeding area to the battle area, reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, add one Digimon card or tamer among them to the hand, and then you return the rest to the deck bottom, and then you may hatch in your breeding area. So effectively, this card is absolutely insane, because I did mention it before in the video, so I won't go into it again too far. This card is just really good. It boosts your consistency, it searches, and it procs itself, so it's just really good. And you still get to hatch in the breeding area, so it's just really, really good. Now, we'll move on to the Louis, because I think this is the important part, because a lot of people are wondering, okay, this card's good, but obviously with the Louis that's already in the game, this just becomes even better, and let me explain why. So, on play, you may move one of your level 3 or higher Digimon from the breeding area to the battle area. Your turn, when one of your Digimon moves from the breeding area to the battle area, by suspending this tamer, you gain 1 memory. So this is just really good, because this becomes a self-contained engine. In some decks, this will allow you to effectively press into 2 attacks on your second turn if you have proper setup and your opponent gives you at least 2 memory. So that's actually really, really crazy. So, this is just a really good card to use, obviously, and in conjunction with Ukkomon already, the one that we have that's a promo. Both of them have already been terrorizing the metagame to a degree, because decks have used them as a rushing engine, as well as Louis to OTK or finish off people when they don't expect it, has been really good. Now, let's move into the decks that this specific engine can fix. So basically, what it's going to do, they're either going to get cracked or fixed pretty well. As we start off with one from BT16, because I did want to make sure I mentioned at least one of the decks. The one that's obviously going to benefit the most from this is Ukkomon, Mummymon, and the new My Otismon deck. So specifically, this deck definitely needed the support. I do think without Ukkomon's inclusion, this strategy would probably be stuck in bottom tier still. This deck definitely got power boosted thanks to the new Ukkomon for 2 reasons. Now, the first problem with My Otismon, if you've never played this deck, is that it really does lack a dedicated line to support it. It doesn't really have anything in terms of an actual bottom end. It really has a high end where it has different Mummymons or Ukkenimons. It has My Otismons because it is a My Otismon in name, so it does have access to those lines. It has Yukio Okawa. That card is definitely, or that tamer is designed for the Mallow My Otismon and My Otismon strategy, but there's a big problem with this line, is that it's just too slow. It hard plays, you can just basically take out the hard play Digimon, and they tried to remedy this with the new Ukkomon and Mummymon, which when you play a level 5 Ukkomon or Mummymon, you just delete it to reduce that play cost by 3, so hard playing a level 5, really good. You need basically set up as well. But we had a problem with this deck still because it was way too slow. But thanks to the inclusion of Ukkomon, we fixed this issue. Now, the big reason that Ukkomon by itself couldn't fix the issue in terms of the promo and Louis was that although you could increase your breeding area and move out hatching quicker, it didn't fix the issue that this deck was slow and it still needed Digivolve. Now, the reason it also was a problem is that there was no dedicated searcher except for trainings and memory boosts. So already another issue. This deck doesn't digivolve. However, with the inclusion of Ukkomon, we now can alleviate this issue, where instead we're now searching for pieces, searching for tamers, grab the pieces we need, start setting up your trash through purple effects, as well as deleting the Digimon by battling. You now have a supplementary engine to pressure your opponent, and it fixes Myotismon's issue, as now you could get the pieces you need, set up in trash with purple cards, and effectively get your line going that way. So Myotismon is probably the biggest benefactor from BT16 that will utilize this engine, because it kind of needs it. Let's move into another deck I have. So I actually have Leomon here as the next one. Now, Leomon's a deck out of Alan Coliseum that was very promising at the start. It looked like it was going to be a very different take on control, as well as having this back and forth with aggression through the barrier effects in the yellow-green Digimon, where the black-green Digimon are focusing more on defense, as well as being able to effectively use their Digivolve effects to stop the opponent's board. Now, this deck was really good for a little bit. I do think it wasn't necessarily top tier, but I think what kept this deck down more than anything else was its inability to either speed up its process of getting to where it needed to be through the usage of like training and boost only. So in Archetype, the deck is just a little bit too slow. And its recoverability is bad. As though it does have fortitude, and you do have access to something like the digivolving effects, you could use the Jerry to play out Leomons. We had a big problem with this deck in that it's just way too slow. Fortitude's good, but you still need to have the Digimon die by battle, or you just had to have it die to basically bring it back, and it had to have Digi-Evolution cards. This is a problem for the strategy, as sometimes you could be stripped of your sources through like Zudomon Ace, and it just made the deck weak. Now, I do think Ukkomon helps this deck a lot, because one of its biggest issues I've seen when I've seen playing this is that it doesn't have enough rookies right now that are compatible to speed the deck up. So in order for it to be fixed for later support, there needs to be a little bit more rookies, as well as a way to kind of just generate more advantage through bodies or something. But this deck definitely would benefit from something like the inclusion of Ukkomon, because with a new rookie, you're now able to grab pieces, you're able to grab tamers, you're able to increase your breeding space by hatching another egg, and then maybe just, digivolve a new Liomon or an Elecmon. You start seeing the process of the wheels turn, where this deck is now actually being able to keep up because this engine's available. You get the additional memory you need through something like the original Ukkomon, or even Louis if you use it, or even if you need to, you could bring out one of your Digimon that are sitting in the breeding area. Maybe your other stack was popped or something, and you can bring it out now and start pressuring the opponent. So I have Leomon here. It's just one of those decks I think is really going to be helped out a lot by Ukkomon. So give it a shot if you want to. It's not too bad. I now have probably the best deck that's going to benefit from Ukkomon, that being Numemon. So Numemon already is probably one of the best decks in terms of just its ability to kind of keep up with a lot of these other decks, but also plays a different type of way to force your opponent to have to deal with their boards. I do think that what makes Ukkomon so good with this deck is that one of their problems I think they had was just they had to rely on drawing into pieces through like Garamon and stuff like that. And then Platinum Numemon was really good, but you'd have to set up. I think what Ukkomon does is it just allows this deck to be a little bit faster than it was already. So, funny enough, they are like slugs. It was just kind of funny, but basically they get sped up a lot. So I do think that's what makes Numemon specifically really strong, is that now it's going to be able to keep up with other decks a little bit easier. Now, effectively, what you also have as an advantage is that by having these additional breeding hatches and phases with like Louis, if you want to drop it, you're now able to OTK, I think, just a little bit quicker. Because before you could run the engine in the deck, but what this takes the place of is something like the Agumon and Agumon X line that had been being played in this deck to kind of search for the additional like Monzaimon X or Numemon X pieces, and then just gaining memory off of Agumon if they had something in battle area. It's better just to press your advantage when you can, because your opponent's not going to be able to keep up with the consistency of this deck if it pops off. So Numemon and Numemon X are here, obviously, as one of my best picks. I think that's going to be cracked by this card, by Ukkomon. So let's move into the next one. I actually have a conjoined form of decks. So I actually have hybrids here. My biggest reason for having hybrids as a whole is that I think all the hybrid decks basically have kind of fallen off except for red, and that's just because red has so much aggression. One of the benefits you get with Ukkomon, specifically from BT16, is now you're able to grab either a Tamer or a Digimon, and by hatching the egg again, if you're playing supplementary rookies, in the case of every color except for blue and red, you're now able to effectively get them into the breeding area to gain that extra draw. So, for green hybrids, maybe you just want to play in something like a Palmon or something like that, and you now have an extra egg, so you can just go ahead, Digivolve it, kind of get that stack going. Because what your benefit is with Ukkomon and any of the hybrid decks is just you need your Tamers. Your Tamers are going to do a lot of work, and you need to have access to them. And your Digimon are also important because just Tamers won't do enough. So Ukkomon basically fixes that issue of being able to get both, because it can search both and it can Digivolve on top of any egg. So it makes it very hard to not want to play it in either deck. So effectively, I have Tamers, I have hybrids here as one of the decks I think can do benefit. Like I said, you need to test it out, I think. That's one of the things I'd say. You definitely need to test it out and see if your deck likes it. But I do think Ukkomon from BT16 is going to slide into hybrids and really do a number. Now, my last deck I have for you today is just one that I really enjoy, and I think it could benefit from adding Ukkomon, and that's actually going to be Beelzemon. So Beelzemon, Impmon, whatever you guys want to call the deck, I do think actually gets a massive buff from having access to Ukkomon. Now, one of my biggest pet peeves with this deck when I played it was the fact that even with trainings and memory boost, one of the problems this deck had was filling its trash, but simultaneously being able to access its core deck quickly, as a lot of times you can't really manipulate your mills as effectively unless you already have decent cards in hand. So one of the things that Ukkomon fixes is that by able to search the top cards of your deck, you're able to sculpt it just a little bit easier by seeing what you've got. Because if you bottom deck something, okay, you know it's not there, but it does allow you to not have to mill it. Because there are times where you'll mill cards, you might mill just a bunch of Digimon, and if it's not like your Wizard Mons or something like that, you're like, okay. But in the case of something like going to head to like bottom deck, like one thing I would do a lot is I mill a lot of my IM Marcos. I hated that because I really needed like one. You're now able to grab it. If you want to play like a supplementary Tamer as well, you could play IM Marco, you could play Matashita if you wanted to just to like draw it or get it out of the rotation to have it on the field. These are one of the reasons that I'm saying that Ukkomon does help a lot, because you're able to grab Digimon, which is primarily what you would want anyways. But even by putting it to the bottom of the deck, most people who have played this deck know, just like I do, you'll mill out a ton of your cards from your deck. So you're not really worried about not seeing the bottom again because you do have some searchers. You're more worried that you're not going to have the pieces you want to mill in order to get their effects off. So by just boosting consistency just a little bit, by either grabbing a Tamer or Digimon, I do think this makes Beelzemon just a little bit stronger than most decks, because it already has the power output. I think most people would agree that this deck has a ton of power output, but it does struggle when it comes to basically ascending to keeping up with certain meta decks. They just are able to either bounce resources away from us, or they basically stall out the deck till it gasses out. So I do think Ukkomon fixes that issue. And pretty much that's it today, guys. I did have only a few decks. There are so many decks that can benefit from specifically Ukkomon, but these are the ones that I'm definitely betting on getting the best value for in their decks. Just because a lot of these decks, they really can just tweak a little bit of their spaces to add into the Ukkomon, or they're already kind of trying to find other engines that work better. Or in some cases, like something like Beelzemon, you're really just trying to see if you can boost your consistency just a little bit more. So making the room in your deck for Ukkomon is actually not a bad thing, as when you see it, the one benefit is as long as you have eggs, you're going to be able to utilize it well. So this has been Brad from the Ed Army signing off, and for all of you out there, to sign on.